And here we are for an episode. Here we are for an episode of Dualistic Unity Raw. It is the last day before the Netherlands retreat. I have been, working diligently to get as many videos rendered as possible for our Patreon supporters. So anybody who misses the groups over the next week while we're away, you can check out the videos that will be posted daily on Patreon of groups that we've had over the last couple of months. It's been a while since we posted some of these archives, just because, frankly, we've had so much on our plate in terms of the Netherlands retreat. Straight up, it's been busy, and there's been a lot involved, and we're stoked to announce that it's fucking here. It's happening. We have 25 people, all in all, coming to this event. We did not sell out this event, but on the other hand, we never really expected to sell out this event. This event was more or less made in the event that we could sell it out. It might sell out, but we did get very close to selling it out. So I'm very excited for all the people that are coming, and the people who couldn't join us and are still coming for the mini retreats. Thank you for reaching out and letting us know that Europe just wasn't doable for you at this time of year. We really do appreciate the fact that you wanted to make it happen, and you just couldn't. We get that, absolutely. But we're going to see you in Virginia Beach in February, and we're going to see you in California in April, and possibly Colorado in June. But we'll get more details out about that after the Netherlands retreat. Andrew, man, I'm actually going to be hanging out with you again in like 2 days. We're going to be chilling the fuck out in another country, getting high.
Fuck yeah. You know what I'm excited for? I'm excited for the chef, because since running, I've been losing a good bit of weight, and I'm just ready to just chow down. Not overly, because I have been so much more sensitive to that too. How much, like, especially when I'm high, how much I've used food. And like, yeah, it's funny because the munchies is such a kind of normalized thing. You know, it's like, oh yeah, you get high, you get the munchies. But like, I don't know. I've been wondering about that, because I kind of wonder about a lot of things, just a lot of behaviors. And I wonder like how much of the munchies are kind of like a way to dull the intensity of the high in a sense. And so I've been noticing that more myself, just with eating in general. Like, because I'm not like, I'm obviously not fat, but I have friends who have been very surprised that I'm not, and I guess it's yeah, because I exercise and stuff. But yeah, I've always eaten a lot of food, and a part of it has been, yeah, just like beyond the point of hunger, and not like in a necessarily in an eating disordered way, but just like knowing, oh, I'm gonna get a stomach ache, but I'll still eat a little bit more. And so, anyway, bringing it back to weed, it's funny just with the munchies, and I'm curious because I know we've talked before about that a little bit, and you said something at the Vancouver retreat, I think, about eating, and you're like, yeah, I don't like eating too much when I'm high. It kind of kills the high a little bit. And since then, I've been that like started turning some gears in my head, like, oh shit, I kind of do that in a sense. Like, it is a way, especially because it becomes a black hole, especially on, you know, 10, 20 milligrams of a edible or something. Like, I could eat a fucking horse and a cow on that and like not even feel a thing until the next day I'm like hungover from having a fucking stomach ache, you know? And so, yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm just kind of curious about your experience with that. Was that like a realization you had with, yeah, oh, it kind of kills the high, or was that just something you've kind of always known?
Okay, so this is a complicated one. This is why it's important that people come to the retreat, because you get to know a little bit more about how weird and fucked up I really am. Hold on. Okay, so cannabis kind of eats away at your blood sugar level. And so one of the reasons that you get the munchies physiologically is because your body wants to replenish that blood sugar level, right? When your blood sugar is low, though, you get a little lightheaded, right? And so when I'm high and a little lightheaded, it's kind of like a freebie.
That is somehow not surprising of a response at all. Like, and it really is why people have to come to retreats, because this side doesn't come across so much in the podcast. Like, it doesn't come across so much in our conversations. Like, Ray's a crazy motherfucker who likes being high, likes being really high, like uncomfortably high, the point where people would fucking panic. He's like, yeah, all right, let's ride this shit. Okay. Yeah, that makes more sense. So it's not necessarily this like, and again, it's not like there's not a right or a wrong thing. It's like, some people like being kind of lightheaded and super fucking high, and some people don't. And so there's ways of mitigating some of that, I guess, but that's fucking hilarious. All right, that makes more sense. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I think I'm following a little bit more where it's coming from.
I really appreciate you asking, though. No, for sure. The other thing is, there is a point to what you were saying, in that as soon as you're digging into the food, you're giving yourself very much a focus, right? And because you're focused on the experience of the food, you're not necessarily in the cerebral quite as much. And I really enjoy those insights, which is why often when I'm high, I like to just sit kind of in silence. I'll drink some water. I'll just chill the fuck out, right? And it's just because there's a lot there in that silence, in that absence of satisfying some urge to, get some flavor or get some kind of aroma or anything, like just the absence of the additional, right? There is there is an experience in that I do love. It's one of the reasons that I went out to the bush, right, for as long as I did. It's one of the reasons that when I was single and not a parent, if you were to come to my apartment, you'd look at it and go, oh wow, this is actually something that somebody has said. I was redefining squalor. Basically, my place was just a cell. Like, it was more or less just a room with a mattress, and I was good. I was perfectly fine with all of that, and it's because there is an infinity of things in my consciousness, and I'm pretty much always in them, and so what's around me almost becomes irrelevant after a certain point. But that's now. At one point, it was disconnecting from all those things that allowed me to tap into that more often, because I was a creature of habit at one point. I was a creature of chasing that carrot, right? Looking for that distraction, wonder where everybody's hanging out tonight. Wonder what's happening, like it's just shit like that, where it's just like, oh, I could just sit right here. And that was it. And then all of a sudden that became the most satisfying thing in the world to me, is where I was. Right. So there is that part of being high that I will say I do enjoy, and it does kind of get distracted by eating. That said, though, old cheddar cheese, man, I shit you not, it's the best when you're high. Anyway, I wanted to mention, because we have a comment on the screen at the moment, that Amanda checked out the community topics episode number 39, which I just released last night, on infidelity. We recorded this episode a while back. It's, again, we've been just going through the onslaught of shit trying to get to the Netherlands. We finally managed to get this out of the queue, edited and public. Listening to it, it's a really good episode. I really enjoyed the points that we made, and what we were talking about in terms of loyalty to an idea rather than the reality, like the concept of a relationship versus the reality of relationship, which is always happening all the time. And so we segment our relationships into these little pockets of preference, rather than paying attention to the totality of relationship, which is basically our relationship with ourselves. It's a damn good episode, is what I'm saying. And so I encourage you, everyone, go and check it out. Community topics number 39 on infidelity. Likewise, we're going to do another community topics very soon. I'm not sure when that vote is up. I'm not sure if Andrew's done that as yet, but if it's not done yet, sweet, it's not done yet. You can go to the Discord right now, go to the community topics channel and suggest a topic. Now, make sure it's not something that we've already covered, because there's 39 episodes. We've covered a lot of shit so far, but I'm stoked. I'm excited. I love these episodes. They're so much fun. I forgot how challenging they can be, because people will just recommend something and just like run with that. But if you check out number 38, which was the influence of music, that episode was surprising. That episode was fucking awesome, because we went into it going, I have no fucking idea. We pulled some shit out of our ass like an hour before, did some quick research, and then bam, we were in it, and it's a really good episode, and it's got background music just to fucking nail that point home.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the trajectory of that one, or the path of that one, whatever, and just our thoughts going in. Like both of us were like, "Oh man, really? Music? That's what everyone voted for." And then it turned out to be, I would say, one of our best community topics episodes. But they are a lot of fun because they really are. It's funny because we'll talk about how, like, we don't go into any of these episodes thinking about much. Sometimes we'll have topics like that. I did just see a Seth Rogen interview on weed, or like a clip from it, that I wanted to bring up. That was pretty cool. He would be fucking awesome to get on the podcast. That would be so sick, because like some of his perspectives in that. But anyway, for the community topics, that's the one time we kind of go in with a very specific topic in mind, but it's not with prep additionally. So it's almost like, in a sense, more difficult than showing up without anything, because then everything's on the table. It's like showing up without anything, but then I gotta narrow it into something and figure out a way that I kind of have to stay on topic. And we do, for like, sometimes we'll veer and loop, and usually almost every time I think it's come back full circle somehow in those episodes, despite even like within the middle, like, fuck, are we even talking about this anymore? And then it'll just like come right back around, which is fun, because then you're just like fucking seeing intelligence play out like through yourself, because there isn't so much control. And when there isn't the need for control, you're allowed to see that intelligence play out through you, as opposed to trying to make it into something, or turn it into something, or curate it into something. So yeah, I will get that done right after Netherlands, probably the following Thursday or whatever. Or that's US Thanksgiving, actually, so probably not that day, but at some point soon after. And so I'll finalize the vote for that, so people have some time to do that. But
Likely
yeah,
by December, I think is what we're saying. By December, more than likely, because after the Netherlands, I'm going to Paris, which I'm very excited about. I'm going to Paris with my daughter. We're going to be hanging out for 5 days, checking out the sites, seeing shit that I've only ever read about, which is great. I love that experience. The difference between something you know of and something that you have actually physically seen, which is really not really much of a difference if you think about it, because you still just know of it. You don't really know it. You can't. It'd be like, oh, I've been to Paris. I know Paris. It's like, well, you knew Paris. Paris isn't what it was now. What it was then. Like, everything changes all the time. You can't possibly think of something and go, that's what that is, because it's changed. You're just thinking what you knew. You're thinking about the past. You're thinking about assumptions, stuff like that. It's really important to recognize that. I find it really funny. We can get into the video about Seth Rogen and weed. Let's do that, because I do love Seth Rogen. I ran across a video earlier about somebody talking about the universe, and just the scientific perspective of, like, why is it here, where did it come from, and all of that. And it's always based in physicality. It's always based in, like, what atoms did what. It's like, you really do just discount the entire subjective thing, don't you? I find that funny. Anyway, Andrew, Seth Rogen and weed.
yeah, so there's a clip, and it is funny how, and I want to get in at some point about the subjective, and like, and that, because I still, sometimes when you say the subjective experience, like, I'm not exactly sure what that means. I guess it's just like my unique perspective without so much objectivity, like ability to measure it and compare, in a sense.
It's the fact that you're only aware of your awareness. Like, there's two very distinct points of view, that you are an object in the universe, or that you are aware, and that is the universe. Okay, so that's the subjective, is from the inside. The subjective is from the inside out, right? Like, that's what we're talking about. And that perspective, that's all there is not explored, because we don't understand it. That's the hard problem of consciousness. We don't understand consciousness. That's why the only thing that we can do is look for it. Like, it's got to be in here somewhere. And we rip apart the body, and we rip apart, the brain, and we look down at a DNA, and we try desperately to figure out, where the fuck is our awareness coming from? But it's the foundation of existence. Without awareness, there would be no existence.
Oh man, that's yeah, that's hitting today. Because then it's just like I'm taking ownership for the universe expressing itself. Like that's all I'm ever doing. Just being it, being reality, being what is, expressing whatever there is, thinking that there's a right or a wrong way to do it, a correct way of going about it, or like, oh man, being able to make up some ideas about that in order to measure it along the way, and yet not just being able to come up with a fiction of a degree of measurement, but still being it the whole time. Yeah, fuck, dude. But
That's the shit. That's what this is all about. This is what I was trying desperately to communicate in season 1. And anybody who hasn't checked out season 1, go and check out season 1 for this point, because this is the point of view that nobody wants to look at, and it's the point of view that, I don't want to say completes the puzzle, but imagine you're looking at a problem, but you're only ever looking at it from one side the entire time, and you're missing an entire other side simply because you won't accept that there's something there. And so all of us, humanity as a whole, we're so committed to this perception of division that we get lost in it. We walk around like bodies in the universe, but we discount the fact that the only thing that you're really aware of is you, right? Like all of this could be nothing more than your awareness. None of this could exist. Understand, like none of this could exist. This is why sensory deprivation tanks really fuck with people, is because once you get into them and you stop giving your body and your awareness any stimulus whatsoever, it starts creating shit. Like it starts creating images and scenes and experiences for you like you're in the physical world and you haven't left that tank. You know, this is why The Matrix is such a powerful movie, is because what they're trying to say to you is that the entire world of The Matrix exists only within your mind. Only within your mind, but you take it to be physical reality. Because that is the reality of all of our experiences, is that we are only experiencing this through our awareness. But immediately that makes us uncomfortable. We're like, that's in my brain. What brain exists outside of the one that you're aware of? Like your awareness comes first. Awareness comes first. It's part of material reality. We forget this. We don't like this. It's the big problem of consciousness, or the hard problem of consciousness. Excuse me. And they say that specifically because they don't want to look at it. They don't want to look at it because there's no explanation for it that doesn't get all weird and metaphysical. Right? There is one very simple explanation for it. That awareness is a property of reality. That awareness isn't generated by your body. Awareness is intrinsic to reality. And just like gravity, it just requires the right environment to demonstrate itself as a force. Gravity requires enough mass, right? Whereas awareness requires just biology. It just requires a very simple, combination of things that create DNA. It just requires life. As soon as there's the ability to express life, it does all the time. Why? Well, because reality is alive, right? But we look at space and we go, well, no, it's just empty space. So, most of our body is empty space. That doesn't make us any less alive. So it's just that we forget this. We compartmentalize. We look at the world as objective. We look at the world in terms of it being a very physical thing, full of objects, not recognizing that the entire perception of objects can only exist from the subjective. It can only exist because you're aware of yourself. And we don't look at that side because we don't like that side, because it feels very lonely. Because as soon as you get to that side, you're like, well, then it's just me. And you have to run, because immediately you're thinking about your idea of yourself. If it's just me, oh, it's just Ray. Oh my God, it's just Ray. No, it's not just Ray. It's not just Andrew. It's not just, Phil or Christina or Stacy. It's not just anyone. It's not just anyone. You see, that's all perception. That's all division. That's all division. But it is just you. It is just awareness. It's just that you're all of it. You are reality. Like, this is what I mean by the observer and the observed are the same thing, but they perceive themselves separately, because that's the only way that experience can happen. But it's so difficult to communicate this, because immediately you're like, oh, so everything around me is created by my mind. You're immediately thinking about your brain again. You're immediately thinking about creating a reality rather than you being reality. right? It's not that it's created by your mind, it's that it is an expression of your mind, not your brain, right? Your mind, the mind as a whole. Right? But because that mind is all that is, because that mind is all that is, everything that manifests within it, quote unquote, is reality. That's the thing. I'm not saying nothing's not real. I'm not saying reality's not real. I'm saying it's absolutely real as you are. But your idea of real is skewed by your perspective of yourself being in a universe rather than being the universe.
Fucking A. Because, man, like we've had this conversation a number of times, and I feel like it's like I go, like with everyone, I'm sure on varying degrees, everyone goes through, you know, ups and downs with it, like gaining perspective, shifting perspectives of it, you
Nobody
know?
sticks around this long.
I've gotten a good taste for why people run, like over whenever. Like at first, like early on in the podcast, I was like, why the fuck would anyone run from this? Why the fuck would anyone? Why the fuck would? And it's like there's, it's oh man, because it's like letting go of every guarantee, every certainty, every mechanism of control, not letting it go, but just taking a good look at the reality of it not existing, like the control not existing, all the things that I use to maintain this sort of control, certainty, whatever it may be, like it's not actually there. It was a comfortable illusion. It is a comfortable illusion. It continues to be a comfortable illusion when I run back to it that has a detriment to it. Like it isn't it, and it keeps me from that subjective experience, the realization that everything that I'm interacting with is equally as alive as me. Like there's not like, oh, the pavement and then the animal and then this and then that. It's all an expression on some variation of me. So it's not even like things are dead and alive. Like that's kind of just a perception too. Like everything is like breathing in a sense. And I it's funny because, I smoke a lot more weed now and don't do as many mushrooms. Back early in the podcast, I was doing a shitload of mushrooms and not smoking as much weed, and kind of the shifts in perspectives from both substances kind of like trickle into the same thing. Like I get super baked. I'm like feeling like a variation of what I would feel on like 3 or 4 or 5 grams of mushrooms, but fully like more functional in that. Because it's right there because it's not the substance doing it. It's not the weed, it's not the mushrooms, it's just me. It's just that it's easier to hold on to a lot of those illusions while being sober, like while being that. And so this then actually ties pretty well into Seth Rogen interview that I saw, how he was talking about, it was on Diary of a CEO, which the guy, Stephen Bartlett, he's the host, very just like, it seems like a great dude, nice guy, but like, very much not a weed consumer at all, like pretty serious, rigid. And he has Seth Rogen on, and Seth Rogen's just like, he's like, Steven asked him something like, how often do you smoke? And he's like, all day, every day since I was 20 years old. And he's like 40 now. And so he was kind of explaining to him his perspective on it. And he's like, it's not to say that I need it. Could I do the things without it? Sure. But he compared it to wearing shoes. Do we need to wear shoes? No, but everyone does. It's a little more convenient. It would have been a bitch if I ran that run on this weekend without any shoes on. Would have been dying, but with some shoes on, some comfortable shoes, made it a lot easier. Same with, he compared it to he was wearing glasses in the interview. He's like, could I exist without my glasses? Sure. Yeah, certainly could. Would it be as enjoyable? Would I appreciate, what I see as clearly? No, it would be a different experience, not necessarily a worse or a better experience, just a different experience. And it's the same. And so we compared the same way with weed and how it's just something that can be utilized, but it can be demonized in this very, very specific way. So it was cool to hear him just kind of talk about how so many of his ideas he came up with. He's like, you don't come up with Sausage Party being sober and not being high chatting with your friends. Like you don't come up with Pineapple Express, in a fucking office on a computer pushing numbers around. It's like they're kind of it necessitates smoking weed and just hanging out to come up with crazy ass shit like that. But for someone to say like, "Oh, well, yeah, he's done those things," and this is just me reflecting on the interview, like someone saying, "Oh, yeah, he's done those things, but like not everyone can do that, not everyone can be like that," and a lot of people just have an aversion to it. I think because they have a very specific way they think they have to live. Like it seems like, and I don't know necessarily a ton about Seth Rogen, that he was just kind of go like through weed was able to realize like he was good, and it helped reinforce that, and then all of these creative things were able to come from that spot. It's not necessarily the weed, it's like the mentality that then weed supplements very, very well. But I really liked the comparison to shoes, glasses, clothes. Like, could we walk around without clothes on? Sure. But, people would have certain thoughts about, do we need cars? No. We could get around in different ways, but yeah, so it was just interesting. And the other thing he said was how humans, like the way we live, he said something like he wouldn't be able to exist in this reality without weed, like in this world without weed. And Steven asked him what do you mean by that? It's like no one is made to exist in this world. Like we do so many things, glasses, shoes, underwear, clothes, all drive cars. Like none of those are inherent to reality. Weed actually kind of is more so. Like weed's actually natural, at least. It's not something created in a factory, in a lab. So to think that humans are these very, very pure, innate, like intrinsic to reality. Of course, like in the sense they are, but in another sense, the way that we live right now is very much a fuckload of buffers from reality. We're living in boxes, we lie on a bed, we wear cushiony shoes, we have glasses and contacts, like all of these things that are not this like pure, just like walk around naked, consume energy from the sun, don't need food, don't need factories, all these things. And so I hadn't really thought about it like that, just how many buffers we have that we just glaze over when discussions like weed and cannabis come up. And yet they're equatable in so many ways that are even more extreme, that a lot of the things we do are incredibly unnatural. Like they don't come from the earth like weed mushrooms actually do. So to have an argument saying that, oh, those are, you shouldn't need those as much, like we're creating things that we feel like we need and then creating more things just because we have this insatiable need for more. We're just making more dumb shit like that. What's the one you've talked about before where someone puts their sock on a little thing and then they're able to put their sock on without bending over? It's like a 3 foot thing that then you put your foot through, and it's like, that's an insane thing just so we don't have to bend over, just so we don't have to lean down and put our fucking socks on. Like there's a shitload of plastic, bunch of factories, but then someone's going to come in with the argument of, oh, well, it creates jobs. It's like maybe creating jobs isn't the end all be all of everything. And maybe a little bit of sensitivity through maybe a little bit more worldwide cannabis use could benefit us in so many ways, at least, swing the pendulum in not necessarily the right direction, but just another direction.
Yeah. Oh man, I have so much to say about this as a whole. I want to say first thing is that I think I've told you about this. My favorite interview that I've ever seen with Seth Rogen was actually on the Daily Show with Jon Stewart, and I think it was after Pineapple Express or after a couple of things had been big hits for Seth Rogen, and he had him on the show, and they were asking, and John was talking to him about, like his career and how successful things had been, like how he handling it, and he was very, very cool about it and all that. And then towards the end of the episode, he's like, okay, so for everybody out there that is dreaming of being a producer and an actor and doing all that, like, what would you recommend to them? What's the key to success? And without missing a beat, he looks to the audience, he looks at the camera, he's like, drop out of high school and smoke weed all day. And John just looks at him, he just laughs. He's like, we can't say that. And it's like, why not? Why can't we say that? That's what he did. That's what he did. And nobody wants to take that in, but that's what he did. And it didn't mean that he was limited. It means he had to find another path, but we all have to find another path, regardless of whether or not you think your path is secure. Right? The only thing that changed was because his path wasn't forged in front of him, because he didn't have a go to high school, go to university, get a degree, learn acting, learn drama, learn directing, do all that. He had to find a different way through twists and turns to get his way there. And every step of the way, because it was his path, he learned that it was his path. He learned that it could be his path. And so there was an underlying message in doing it the fucking hard way. And that's what we try and streamline in society. It's like, how do you get from here to there? Well, here's a set path. That's how you get there. And this is how you become a success. What's that? You want to go viral on Instagram? Here's a hook. Here's the things you need to do. Here's the secrets to go and fucking, and it's just like, just be yourself, because that's ultimately what's going to do it. Because even if you went viral and you weren't being yourself, does it feel good? Like, how long does that last for? Like that's very much it. So be yourself, forge ahead, make your own fucking path, because at least it's your path. And that lesson is more profound than anything. Like, I don't know how the fuck I got to where I am right now with Dualistic Unity. I love this every day of my life right now. I love my quote unquote job, because it's an expression of me. The path I took to get here went through a bunch of shit that had nothing to do with this. Like, straight up, nothing to do with this. Like, if I had thought to myself when I was 15, it's like, how would I become part of something like this? I wouldn't even have known what I was talking about. I wouldn't even know. Like, the idea of Dualistic Unity would just sitting there talking all day. Like, it's just fucking like, what? Just being yourself and telling people they're okay the way they are. Like, none of that would have made any sense to me once upon a time. Can you imagine how many of our life paths, our goals and our ambitions are set in states of mind where we just don't have the clarity to know better? And then we think to ourselves, well, if I let it go, I'm wavering. I'm not committed. I don't really want it. And there's all this bullshit where it's like, well, maybe you don't want it. Think about that. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with suddenly going, I don't want it anymore? If you're honest about it, nothing. If you're responding out of fear, you're like, I can't get it. That's a different story. That's a different story. But I mean, fuck it. Do it your way. Do it your way. And get high if you can.
Yeah, well said. I like the that response that he had that you kind of started out with, because there's nothing saying that that's not as equally as potential of a way to find success. Like, it's literally how he did, and I see that with like video games. Like, there's these sports leagues out there. Like, that has the potential to be a way to make money if it's something you want. If you have a passion about it and you're good at it, and the response people give to that, despite it now being a way that you can make money, is, well, yeah, but it's super low odds. It's like same with sports, and yet you're shoving your kid through a bunch of sports, trying to get them to be a professional athlete. It's like, those are, I don't know the odds exactly, but they're probably lower odds than becoming an esports athlete. Maybe they're similar, whatever, but they're along the same lines. And so to think that there is a correct way and that we know anything about what tomorrow is going to mean for our life, like what tomorrow is going to bring us, what we're going to run across, who we're going to meet, who we're going to interact with, what conversations we're going to have, what we're going to learn, what we're going to find out, what we're going to discover. Like, there's an endless potential to that we like to cut down. Like, I want to cut that down to being this easily digestible thing that I can feel good about, that's very basic and simple. And I just got to do this to get this, do this to get this, do this to get this. And when you actually look at it, it's like, sure, that works for some people. It doesn't work for a fuckload of other people, and yet we keep just shoving through it. We keep just fucking pile driving through that shit. Like, well, I just don't really want to think about it for myself. Think about what I actually want to do. Think about what I actually want to do with my life. So I'm just going to look around and see what other people are doing. And hey, they're doing it. Yeah, they're kind of depressed as fuck and kind of hate their lives, but they have some money. They got more money than I do in their bank account. People seem to like them. People seem to want to be them. And that's a difference too. Wanting to be someone versus actually liking and appreciating them. And I think that's something that we get kind of confused about a little bit too. Like a lot of people want to be certain people. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to want to hang with those people. And yet we're trying to be the people that we want to be and not realizing like the fullness of that experience. And so if you're willing to take a good hard look at everyone you're trying to be or everyone you want to be, like it probably wouldn't be what you wanted to be. You're just not willing to take a good hard look at the reality of what that would be like. And I'm not saying like sit down and with them and really sit on some type of person you want to be or the person you want to be, but realize that, oh, I have potential right now. I have potential right now to do things. And the only thing causing me to think that I shouldn't be the thing that I am is my own assumptions, my own thoughts about that. But when that isn't there as much, then you're like, oh, I have the potential to be influence as well. Like I have the potential for influence no differently than anyone else does. And if that's where the priorities lie, is what influence I have right now, that it isn't so much about what your life looks like, it's about what you are. It's about what you do. It's about what you're the fullness of the interactions, not doing the right thing or avoiding doing the wrong thing, but just being there for it, paying attention, interacting, relaxing a little bit because there is no right way. It's like you're going to stress to have more influence. Like, what kind of influence is that going to be if that's the priority on reality? And there's no preconditions to having influence. It's like inherent to what you are. Like you are influence, literally influence in everything that you do. Every turn that you make, every word that you say has influence and there's like a sort of baseline across the board influence for every interaction that we have, a potential influence. But if you're very, very, very focused on yourself being perceived in a certain way, then it's not gonna you're still gonna have that influence, but there's gonna be a different form of influence there that then is very draining in a sense. It's like very, very draining to be focused on something that doesn't actually exist. It's just like, because if you're focusing on your idea of yourself, you're maintaining this idea of yourself, you're continuing to perpetuate the assumption of yourself. And that takes a lot of energy to do that because it's continually shifting potential perspective that you're trying to maintain. So it's like, grinding up against this wall, this friction, trying to maintain this thing using a fuckload of energy that could be utilized in what you're doing. You just weren't paying so much attention to your assumptions about what was going on or how you were doing. And I'm feeling like I'm just starting to get a sense for that, like not having to fucking keep tabs on how I'm doing, how things are going. Just like, yeah, this is going how it's going. It's going to be what it's going to be, and it's going to be heard how it's going to be heard, and the interaction is going to go how it's going to go, and that's about it. There's no guarantee of any up or down, positive or negative, good or bad response. It's just I'm just here interacting. There's inherent influence to everything, but it's just what it is. Like I can try and judge it or measure it, but there's no actual way to do it. So it's just going to be a fucking failed attempt every single time that I can convince myself isn't.
But if everything is you, if we go back to our original conversation, if this isn't you within something, and it's not something within you, it's just you, then everything is reflective of you, which means that all of the trials and tribulations in your life are not what you perceive them to be. They're reflective of your relationship with yourself, your own willingness to try, your own willingness to have faith in yourself, your willingness to be authentic, your willingness to be vulnerable. Because the more you are, the more you're being yourself, the more you're aligned with yourself, which is when things just start to miraculously work out, or rather it seems like. And you can ask yourself, well, are they working out, or am I just in a state of mind where I'm able to make the most of them? And I would ask you, is there a difference? Right? And it's because there is no internal and there is no external. You are not trying to get by in the world. You're going through the experience of yourself. And everything that you experience in this world is going to reflect your experience with yourself. And you can go, well, yeah, but of course, that makes sense, even psychologically, right? But the only reason you're having a problem with what I'm saying is because you really don't want to let go of the idea of yourself within something, because it's uncomfortable, or at least at first, until you realize it changes nothing. But it really drives home the fact that you are here now. That is the priority, because it will always be the case in every incarnation of this experience. No matter who you are, where you are, or what life you're living, it's always about here and now. This is where you are. And understanding that that's where you are forever changes your perspective of everything, changes your perspective of every encounter, every job, every menial task, every lesson, every frustration, every hardship, every emotion. It changes everything, because now it does have some meaning. Not about you, but because it is you. It couldn't have a more personal meaning. It couldn't mean more to you. And so the entire world, your entire experience becomes far, far more intimate, far more symbolic, and far more unified. And it's simply because you've let go. But holding on to the idea of yourself in the world, that's not letting go. That's holding on. And it's because it's comfortable. It's another aspect of false certainty. It's just one that we don't want to question. That's why I'm such a fan of season 1.
Yeah, and then there's one of the biggest shifts then is a fullness in every experience. Like everything is so much more full, right? Like every interaction, because like this is the entire situation, the entire experience is you, that you have influence on, but like that you are. So there's nothing else to it's like there isn't so much thought left when that's the entirety of you, and you're not like our thoughts about ourselves are basically rooted in the assumption that I'm something separate, that I'm something in the world, that I'm something in reality. Like that's where all of the thoughts, the continued sort of internal dialogue about myself comes from. But without that, then the thoughts shift, like they transfer to the situation, to the experience being had, as opposed to how I'm doing in the experience, utilized for a means of measurement or consideration or certainty or safety or whatever, to just being involved in the situation. And then those thoughts become about what's actually going on, and they're able to be used instead of this sort of fog and weight that is suppressing us, in a sense, suppressing me. But it's just what I'm looking at. Like that's all it's just what I'm paying attention to, because this right now is no different than any other experience that I'll ever have right now. It's the same. Like reality is obviously always changing, but it doesn't change when you start looking at it. It just, everything starts getting filled in more. Like it becomes fuller in the sense of like, oh, this is it. This is all that's happening is right now. Not my thoughts about what's happening, not my considerations about what's happening. It's just what's happening. And there's a lot happening right now. But I can kind of try and mitigate that by focusing attention elsewhere and missing it, and just, fogging up that vision a little bit.
I like the word that you use there, fuller, because when there's nothing else that you can ever become, and there's nowhere else to go, that is fulfillment. That's fulfillment. That's the look that's what we're all looking for. And it cannot exist so long as you are a character trying to get somewhere. It's only ever going to exist when you arrive. And what's really funny is that when you finally do arrive, truly arrive, you find that not only have you never left the here and now, but that you are the here and now. So it's a hell of an experience. And I'm excited because we are going to get to have this conversation and actually have this conversation in person and go into a deeper dive in person in the Netherlands in like 2 fucking days. So I'm stoked. We are going to end here and we're going to continue on Patreon. You can join us. It's a tier 2 call today. There's a free 7-day trial if you'd like to check that out. There are still some tickets to the Netherlands left. If you're in Europe or if you just like to fly the fuck out there, we would love to see you. Let us know if you can make it, of course, because we've already sent out the food forms and everybody for everybody to let the chef know what they would like or what they don't like. But nonetheless, there is still this 24-hour period where if you can make it to the Netherlands, we would love to see you. We're meeting 4 o'clock at the airport in Amsterdam on Saturday. Andrew, this has been a blast, man. I'll see you on Patreon in a little bit.